And we are live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Bigfoot Odyssey. This is our 8th night of our 12 nights of Christmas, and Danielle has done a fantastic job doing that. So glad everyone could join us. I'm your host, Carrie Arnold. With me, as always, producer and the co-host of the show, Miss Daniela Aiolo. How are you, dear?
I'm good, thank you.
Good deal, good deal. We have a very interesting hour for you tonight. Our guest this evening, he is a Sasquatch researcher, been doing it for quite a long time, coming out of British Columbia, Thomas Steenburg. Thank you for joining us here.
Very glad to be here, sir.
Well, we're very glad to have you. Before we get started, we'll remind everyone again, as usual, keep it clean for us. We do appreciate that. Kids might be watching and they can read. They can read these days. So we appreciate you guys being nice and cordial with each other as well. It is Christmas time, after all. So we appreciate that. But we had some tragedy at work. And one of the guys I work with passed away, and his family just asking that you guys keep, his name is Steve, just keep his family in your prayers. Appreciate that. Not trying to bring everything down, but it's just a bad time. It's a whole bad situation, and we do appreciate all of our Bigfoot Odyssey prayer warriors for reaching out there and thinking about these folks very much. All right, Thomas. So you've been doing this for a long time. Tell us, when did you get started and what got you to doing this?
Well, it all started me. I was a weird kid growing up in the 1960s. And I remember one day for me, it all started one day when my parents came home with a large hard copy Reader's Digest book for me and my sister, who's 2 years younger than I am, for education purposes. And in that book, they had chapters on everything you can think of: volcanoes, hurricanes, tornadoes, this, that. And of course, they had a large section on the age of the dinosaurs with all those pretty paintings you used to see all the time, which were anatomically incorrect, as we know, as the paleontology knows now. Brontosaurus sitting in the water because they said he was too heavy to walk on land too long, and T-Rex standing straight up, dragging his tail on the ground. Right in the middle of this large chapter on dinosaurs, there's this little 2-page paragraph called "The Thing in Loch Ness," with the usual 3 blurry black and white pictures. I don't know, something clicked, and I must have read that thing 100 times. And pestering my parents, who eventually got me a library card, and I went down there and looked for more books on this thing. And I knew very young I was never going to move to Scotland. I started reading about this thing in Western Canada that they called the Sasquatch. In the United States, they called it Bigfoot. And I don't know, I started concentrating on that. And not too long after that, school night, when I should have been in bed, I came down, walked into the living room, and my parents were watching a movie on the old black and white TV. And instead of getting the old, "Get back up there, boy, what are you doing at school night tomorrow?" The usual that I would have gotten. He said, "The lad's interested in this kind of thing. Maybe I'll let him watch it." My mother said, "Oh, no, he can't watch this. He'll have bad dreams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." And my father won the argument, and I'm sure he's regretted that ever since. And what was playing was that old Hammer horror film starring Peter Cushing, The Abominable Snowman of the Himalayas. And I don't know, it was Sasquatch from then on. And I actually started researching when I was posted to Western Alberta in the 1st Battalion, Prince of Patricia Canadian Light Infantry. I took one look at the Rocky Mountains, and it was a beautiful winter's day. And I saw the mountains for the first time in my life, and it looked like a phony Hollywood backdrop, like the old paintings they used to have. And I thought, there's no wall between Alberta, Western Alberta, and Eastern BC. If they've been seen in Eastern BC, they have to be seen here too. So I took out ads in the local press in Southern Alberta. It was worded quite simply: Sasquatch. Anyone who believes they had a sighting of this creature, please contact Thomas Steenburg, and a phone number. And I didn't expect much result, but I swear to God, my phone was almost ringing on a daily basis. And that article, I got a phone call from the late Professor Vladimir Markotic, who is at the a professor of archaeology and anthropology at the University of Calgary. And he edited a book with the late Grover Krantz called Sasquatch and Other Unknown Hominids, and he kind of took me under his wing, so to speak. He was a senior citizen even back then, and I did most of the field research, and he did a lot of the academic stuff. And through time, I met the late John Green, I met the late Rennie DeHaden, I met the late Grover Krantz, I met the late Bob Timmis, and I got to know all these gentlemen and did a lot of work with them all. And that's basically how I got going.
Well, you know, all those guys you mentioned, you know, to me and most people that have looked into this subject, those are the giants. And I think a lot of the researchers nowadays really should look at what these guys did and what they went through. I think it might actually save them a lot. I mean, I'm not intentionally taking you out of that, because I know I've heard your name for a long time. And I'm sure a lot of people here have, that you've done a lot of noteworthy things in the subject. But everyone that's doing this now is standing on the shoulders of those guys. And
absolutely. Yep.
It's kind of upsetting to me that you'll hear people talk down. I've heard people talk down about these guys. And I mean, how do you stand on the shoulders of giants and spit down at them? It's just, it's upsetting. I'm not trying to bring the show in that direction, but they just don't realize these men have gone through the same things they're going through now. But if you could just take their information, you know, use it, grab their coattails and try to launch yourself a little bit farther past, I think we'd get a lot farther in this subject. What do you think it's going to take outside of a body? Do you think it's going to take a type specimen for us to get recognized here?
Type specimen is what's needed to bring the mystery to an end, if that's what you mean. Science, when science gets what science is always demanded. That's the only way the Sasquatch mystery will ever be brought to an end, and that's the only way the Sasquatch will be taken from the realm of cryptozoology into the realm of everyday zoology. That's what has to happen. Now, whether or not that means one has to be shot and brought in, or one gets plowed by a bus on the Trans-Canada Highway one of these days, or someone comes across sufficient skeletal remains. But that is what is required when science gets what science has always demanded. And no amount of wishful political correct thinking is ever going to change that, because that's just the way it works.
So tell me, what do you think it is? I mean, we know these creatures exist. Anyone in an official capacity, you know, Department of Interior, these people have to know that these creatures are out there. What do you think it is that's just keeping them from opening the door there?
Well, the main reason is exactly that. As far as officialdom, i.e. science government, it's still myth and mythology. And as long as it's in that realm, they're not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole officially. And let's face it, the Sasquatch field today more resembles an asylum that's being taken over by inmates.
No, can't disagree with that. But I guess my question is, they you know, whether we know it's you know, labeled a myth, mystery, whatever, but they do exist. They're not a myth, and they have to know that these creatures do exist. They have to know. So I mean, why wouldn't they open that door and let the people know? Do you think it's money? Do you think it's the logging industry? There's a lot of theories out there about it.
No, I don't think it's not only do they not know, until it's proven to exist, they don't care.
They know, man. They have to know. They're not very good at their job if they don't know. You know?
Well, no, they're not very good at their job, but no, they don't know, because as far as they're concerned, officially, there is no such thing. It's just mythology and folklore. And as long as it's in that realm, and they believe it's in that realm, that's the way it will stay. And so a lot of these people who call themselves researchers today, you look at with their activity and what they claim, and 98%, of course, of what you see on YouTube is absolute garbage, at least in my opinion. And they see that and they say, I'm not going to touch that.
Oh, it's career suicide.
Yes, absolutely.
The way the subject is right now, absolutely. But getting off of that, something we talked about just before the show is the origin of the word Sasquatch. Tell us. I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't know that. I didn't know that.
Well, they're all up and down the British Columbia coast and the west coast of the United States. Various First Nations had various names for it. Sonequa, Oma, Bukwas, Sutkum, you name it. They're all different names for it. And even at first, the European communities had their own names for it. Before 1929, an agent, in other words, he was a spy for the crown, named J.W. Burns. And he was assigned to the Chehalis or Chehalis Reserve right here in the Harrison Lake area. And the people got to know him and really trust him. And you'll find a lot of the older people there today, if it weren't for J.W. Burns back when they were kids back in the 1920s, they never would have went to school. So even though he was never a qualified registered teacher, he filled in his time by teaching at their local school. And when they got to trust him, they started talking about their folk tales and their legends and their stories. And they kept talking about this thing in the bush that was basically described as hairy, upright walking apes, for the lack of a better description. And they called it Sasquatch. The best way to pronounce is take the word basket, drop the B, and put SAS in it. Sasquatch. And Mr. Burns, he used to write articles in Canadian Magazine about life in the reserves. And he wrote an article for Maclean's Magazine that appeared on April Fool's Day, April 1st, 1929. And he took their name, Sasquatch, and he mispronounced and misspelled it, and he called it Sasquatch. And that name caught on in Canada like wildfire, and slowly through time drowned out all the other local names all up and down the coast. That's how the name came about, by a mispronunciation and a misspelling in a Maclean's Magazine article, April 1st, 1929. And as you probably know, your American name Bigfoot came about in the Associated Press in 1958 when all the footprints were found in the Bluff Creek region of California. They never heard of the Sasquatch in Canada. They didn't know what else to call it. They called it Bigfoot. It's been known as Bigfoot in the United States ever since. But, you know, Sasquatch is kind of the Canadian name and Bigfoot's the American name for the same thing.
Yeah, you hear them both, but it does seem like Bigfoot carries a little bit more of a stigma than Sasquatch does.
Well, everything carries more of a stigma because the United States has Hollywood, the United States has media, the United States has all the press, you name it. We even up here, when I started, no one up here ever used the term Bigfoot, but because so many people watch American television, American radio, read American books, I get more people up here now using the term Bigfoot than Sasquatch.
Yep, that's us. We got to dramatize everything.
Let's talk about some of the encounters that you've heard about and how you filter through them in terms of what people are seeing and the other side to Bigfoot, the other things people report that, you know, the mind speak. Where you at with all that?
No, to me, and again, I'm only expressing my own opinion based on the years I've been in on this. I'm strictly zoological. As far as I'm concerned, if the Sasquatch does indeed exist, we're dealing with an unclassified higher primate, nothing paranormal or supernatural about it whatsoever. And if it does exist, that's what we're dealing with. And there's always, only when you interview a witness, you always got to remember you only have three possibilities, only three. One, they saw a Sasquatch. Two, they mistook somebody or something for a Sasquatch. Or three, they're lying. And I'm afraid this day and age, with all these silly shows and everything that are all over the television, and one of the worst things to ever happen to this research, great tool it is, has been the internet. I'm afraid number three is more common than anything else. Mm-hmm.
You think, yeah, well, it's possible, isn't it?
Yeah.
People like the attention, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. And people always have always told stories from the beginning of time for no other reason than they just enjoy taking people for a ride. Yeah. And people make up, and it's easy. The woods are right there. Let's go out and make it some. Hey, you want to fake something? Run through there in the ghillie suit. Set your camera on auto so it focuses on the trees nearby, and we're blurring out of shape. You know,
Oh,
it's
that's
easy.
right.
Yeah.
There is a fourth one in there. People being hoaxed. You could hoax somebody, I guess.
Yeah. Well,
And
hoaxing is lying. So yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you could
Yeah.
hoax someone and them think they saw one, so they wouldn't be lying. They would just be that would be somebody else
That's
lying.
mistaken identity. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Mistaken identity. Okay, I got you.
Mhm.
It surprises me that you've done this as long as you have, and you still haven't concluded that they actually do exist.
I believe they do exist. I'm 90% convinced they do exist. I may have had one sighting myself, only once, in all the years I've been looking. But my philosophy from the beginning has always been stick to the facts and never deviate from the facts. I saw a figure in March of 2004 when I was heading up the west side of Harrison Lake with a fellow in a truck named John Miles. And I saw it for about 4 seconds as it crossed the cut line where the power lines went through and disappeared in the trees on the right-hand side. It was very big. It appeared to be walking upright and was jet black in color. But, like I said, I stick to the facts. The facts are it was probably close to a mile away, and I couldn't see detail. So I can't say with 100% certainty it wasn't a big, odd-looking man way up there. I can't say that. But I believe today, if I took a 7-foot guy and put him up there, I'd barely see him at all. I mean, this thing seemed big even for Sasquatch. So if that was a Sasquatch, I'd seen one. If it was not, I still have not. Yeah.
Gotcha.
When you're saying stick to the facts, we don't have that many facts, really, do we, about Sasquatch? But we hear lots of things. And we were talking last night, Kerry, weren't we, to Ken Walker, and he'd said that someone was suggesting that they bury their dead. What do you think about that?
Well, it's a possibility, but it's all guesswork. It's all assumption and a hypothesis. It's possible they bury their dead or cover them up or something like that, but we just don't know. We won't know anything like that until question number 1 has been answered. Do they, in fact, exist?
But we don't know any other creature that does that. That's all I'm saying. That in terms.
I've seen film and I've heard stories of black bears covering up a dead black bear and things like that. Yeah. They also cannibalize them. It happens, you know. But yeah, nature does play a lot of strange tricks on people. There's no doubt about that. Mm-hmm.
Just before I forget, someone in the chat was asking about your books. You've done 3, is it? Or
I've written 3 myself, and I co-authored 2 others. First one was called The Sasquatch in Alberta. That came out in 1989, 1990, and was recently republished by Hancock House in 2018. The second book was Sasquatch, Bigfoot, The Continuing Mystery by Hancock House. That came out in 1993. In Search of Giants, also Hancock House. That came out in 2000. I co-authored Meet the Sasquatch with Chris Murphy and John Green. That came out in 2004. And the latest is Sasquatch in British Columbia. Again, I co-authored that with Chris Murphy, and that came out in 2012. I've done editing work on other books as well for people. Yeah.
And you've done some TV work.
A lot. Yes, a lot. I've been a lot.
What are some of the things you've been doing? And where can people, you know?
Well, a lot of the shows I've been on are American, so I've never even seen them. I don't have cable TV, so I've never seen them. I wasn't going to spend $80 a month to watch television commercials 50% of the time, and I hate their package system, so I told them to stuff it. And I've been without cable TV now since 2000. But I've done a lot of programs in Canada, Creepy Canada. I did an episode there. Another show, Mysterious Monsters. Oh, what was that show called? It was on the air till just a few years ago. I did 2 episodes of that, one on Vancouver Island and the other one when they did on Snell Grove Lake with the cabin that was supposedly trashed by one of these things.
Monster Quest?
Monster Quest. Thank you, sir. Went right out of my head. Yeah. I was on 2 episodes of that. And we used to have a show here in Canada called On the Road Again. I did that. and various news documentaries like Global and CBC and stuff like that. Yeah, I've done a lot of programs and documentaries on television. Yeah.
Mm. Let's go back to research, and you've obviously must have seen a difference in how, in the old, I call it the old times, don't take that in any other way, how everything was documented compared to when the internet came along. Do you think that is now hindering people's research? Changed?
No, I think the biggest thing that hinders research is someone who's coming into this today is so bombarded by so much junk. And they really have no idea. They don't know how to weed out the chaff from what may be true, right? One of the worst things, like I said, the internet, there are so many things now that are almost accepted as gospel that, in my opinion, and I'm only, again, expressing my opinion, they took on a life of their own and they never should have. You know, to give you an example, twisted trees. I remember when all that started. It was an hypothesis put forward by the late Bob Titmuss, who wondered, could Sasquatch have something to do with this? But it was never established fact. It was just an hypothesis. It was a question. But through time and telling and other stories, by the time the mid-1980s rolled around, every documentary on television was saying twisted trees was signs left by Sasquatch. Well, that was never established. It was just an hypothesis that took on its life of its own. And now people coming in think it's established fact. It's not. And the same holds true for so-called shelters, nests, and everything else you can mention that everyone seems to be spending a lot of time on. Yeah.
Same thing happened. Wes Germer had suggested one time that just from all the reports he was hearing, it seems like there are different types. It seems like in the Northeast, there's a different type than there is in the Southeast, in the Southwest, and it seems like there's a different type up here in the Pacific Northwest. Well, hey, they took that, and all of a sudden now there's 4 different types of Sasquatch, and they were given all these differences and details about, now there's a type 1 or a type A, now there's a type 1A and a type 2. A 2B is like this, and I put my hand in my face. I can't stand hearing stuff like that because there's just no way to know these things.
Well, absolutely. Remember that movie, The Legend of Boggy Creek?
Sure.
Yeah, our Folk, Arkansas, in that area there, they made it seem like the Sasquatch there, if that's what it is, had only 3 toes on its feet, when it was actually only one incident, really, that 3-toe theory was based on. You talk to Lyle Blackburn, people just said most of the footprints that were found were 5-toed, like everywhere else. But through time and retelling, people seeing that movie, as entertaining as it was, they think, well, all the hairy hominids in Mississippi and Arkansas and areas are all 3-toed. Well, that's not true.
You know, an alligator can leave a really
good 3-toed track.
Good 3-toed track that can look an awful lot like a person with 3 toes or a big thing. You know, it just depends on how they slide just right.
Yeah.
I've seen them. There's a lot of alligators around here. So I think.
Well, the 3-toed thing for the Folk, Arkansas creature really all came about because of the tracks found in Willie Smith's bean field that just conveniently happened to happen when they were filming that movie. Lyle Blackburn said, and I think he's probably right, that maybe they were just trying to make something exciting for the film being made, and those tracks weren't authentic, but we'll never know. That's the problem.
For sure.
I was just looking at a comment in the chat saying Scotching strategies. Maybe it's established because so many people see twisted trees around other signs. But if someone was to mention another thing that you find often in a wood, you'd look for that as well.
Yeah. Well, what other signs is he talking about?
I guess maybe tracks, probably. I mean,
well, maybe. In all the years I've been looking, I've interviewed hundreds of people who claim to have seen Sasquatch, and I've talked to a lot of people who've seen twisted trees, but I yet to interview one person who said he watched a Sasquatch twist a tree.
Sure.
And when it comes to things like shelters and stuff, I always ask, why are these shelters always found 50 feet off a dirt road or a cut line and nowhere else? And I remember one incident where these people sent me this video. They said, we found no evidence of human activity except one old boot that was like 100 feet away. I said, well, you're up in the Sasquatch. You got evidence of people. The boot. You know, well, no one else has ever been here. I said, how do you know that? You're there. How do you know no one's ever been there? Were you monitoring every traveling road at the time within a 2-mile radius? How do you know no one's ever been there? Yeah, you're there.
So there's an extreme lack of critical thinking in this subject when it comes to most people that just want to believe. And you know, for me, I've seen it. I know what I saw. I know that's what it was. It's hard for me to tell someone else they're lying when they say it because I've seen it. Why couldn't they have seen it?
Absolutely, Terry. And you want to know something, Daniela? We've mentioned this before. You know how ridiculous you and I sound to Carrie if you've seen a Sasquatch? Yeah, and we're still questioning the whole thing, especially me after looking for it for 40 years. May have seen one myself, but I still won't say so. You know?
Well, I wasn't looking for it. It can't change
yeah,
me.
Absolutely. You know? Yeah. So someone who's actually seen one close up, we sound like morons.
I wasn't going to say that. I was just wondering how you could do this for 40 years and still be questioning it. But I mean, you have to be skeptical, don't you? I mean,
well, absolutely. That's what a researcher is. You're trying to find an answer, and you have to accept the possibility in the end you may turn out to be wrong. So many people in this field, especially today, who call themselves researchers, they're not researchers at all. They're more like religious leaders trying to push a faith. They believe in it 100%. They feel it's their job to convince everybody else. You know, that's not what a researcher is supposed to be. A researcher is something you almost have to be like a cop at a crime scene. Stick to the facts, never deviate the facts, and draw your conclusions based on what the witnesses said they saw and any evidence you happen to have found.
You're right. And I think that's how we end up. I think that is exactly how we end up with twisted trees and tree structures. I'm not saying Sasquatch doesn't do these things. They absolutely could do them.
It's a possibility.
But that's what happens is instead of you getting someone out there holding their own feet to the fire and trying to debunk things, they're trying to confirm everything is Sasquatch.
Absolutely. Every tree twig snap, every tree branch break, every sound they hear, they're saying is Sasquatch related because you can't figure out what it is.
I heard some howls that were recorded that one researcher called a mating call. I don't know how he knew that, but he called it a mating call. And I heard that sound my entire life growing up, and it sounded just like red wolves to me.
Yep. I'll give you an example of that. I'll give you an example I'm well known for. You heard of the Chehalis Sounds?
I have.
Well, that happened in 2005 near the Chehalis Reserve. Folks saying this thing is making these screaming noises. We had gotten several reports. I even heard it once myself. And these were sounds that I would have bet money on at the time would have been proven to be Sasquatch in origin because they were just so freakish we couldn't figure out what the hell they were. And they were exactly like the Puyallup recordings of 1969, 70. Exactly like the Klamath River recordings in 1993 and the Snohomish recordings in 1979. I would have bet money they would turn out to be Sasquatch. Well, during this investigation, friend and fellow researcher at the time, Jerry Matthews, and I were out in the Chehalis Flats. Well, what happened is we eventually told these people, the late John Green told these people to put their camera out at night if it happened again. They said, why? It's pitch dark, can't see anything. Yeah, but at least we'll hear what you're talking about. And they did, and that's how we heard the noises. And we said, it's exactly like those other famous sounds, I bet you. And we investigated for many, many weeks. And in the morning, in April, Jerry Matthews and I were out in the flats. We heard the sounds, and we went rushing towards them. Think, this is it. We're going to see what's making these noises. And we did. It was a coyote. It looked like invisible hands were squeezing this animal's guts when it let out this incredible cry. And I thought I knew every sound a coyote made. I've lived with them all around me my whole life. You know, in Waterville, Alberta, we used to sit out and hear them. It was like a serenade. but they never made this particular sound. And what I think it was is a rarely heard location cry, letting another coyote know where it is, because when a second coyote came bounding out of the bush, they both immediately reverted to that familiar yip, yip, yipping type noise we've all heard a million times, and it looked like a happy reunion between two puppies who were jumping all over each other and everything, and off they went. Happy as clams. So we were happy we found out what they were, and very disappointed it wasn't what we hoped they were. But the most strangest thing was when I announced this, holy God, did a lot of people not want to hear it. Fellow researchers who I had great respect for and stuff were suddenly mad at me. And all the especially the guys who use these particular sounds in their so-called call blasting expeditions, you know, they just didn't want to hear it. And someone said, well, maybe it was a Sasquatch impersonating a coyote. I said, you're willing to accept the Sasquatch did, but you're not willing to accept the coyote did. I mean, to me, that was very strange, but hey, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's still people who bring up those sounds, plus the Puyallup recordings, the Shoalmas recordings, and the Klamath River recordings, and still insist they have to be Sasquatch in origin. I said, no, they're not. You need to concentrate on other sounds, but we still don't know what did it.
Well, Daniela's going to get into some of the accounts that I believe that you feel are credible here in a second. But first, I want to say this. And I just kind of lost my train of thought there a little bit. Some of these things that researchers do, and if you're really thinking about this creature, okay, and you are 100% convinced they exist, you have to realize how difficult it is to get close to them, to get any kind of evidence, a sighting, any of these things. But they still do these things like call blasting. Do they think they're fooling or anything? You have to think about the behavior of this creature and what it must be, for it to be out there and exist and stay away from us the way it does, to go out there and do some of the things they do. To me, it just seems off that they would, like, the Sasquatch doesn't know they're there. They have to know that these people are out there, and they're probably sitting there 20 feet away watching them, is what I'm saying. What do you think about some of these? You mentioned call blasting. What do you think about some of these other techniques people use?
Well, I think a lot of them are just wishful thinking on the part of the people who are doing it. It's possible Sasquatch makes noise. They probably do. I mean, people report everything from high-pitched screaming noises to whistles. But my opinion is a noise in the dark is just that. If you don't see what did it, it's just a noise. There could be other explanations for it. And when you're talking about like people going out and continuously doing these things, well, the first thing they need to do is make sure there's no other research group within a mile or two, because you start blasting things, they're going to blast back.
That's right.
That's the thing. That's the thing I don't like about tree knocks. If you start knocking on a tree and there's anybody within 1,000 meters of you, or as far away as a mile, if you're on a lakeshore or something like that, especially if it's guys, they hear you knocking on a tree, they're going to knock back. As simple as that. They're just going to do it. Yeah, but a lot of people, like you said, they're so desperate for something to happen. And you were saying about you're basically referring to its elusiveness by nature. I've had so many witnesses tell me that if they hadn't looked right at it, they would never have known it was there. It was standing that still. And when the subject realizes you've spotted it, it wastes no time to leave the area, 98% of the time. And you just see the unbelievable for a few minutes before it disappears in the shadows. And it usually, in most cases, doesn't come out of the tree line to look at you. It's 15 feet back in the shadows looking at you. There's no doubt in my mind that if the Sasquatch does indeed exist, sorry, Kerry, because I haven't had a good sight, and I still got a question that if it does exist, that I've probably been within 100 yards of one more than one occasion, because I've had that feeling of being watched. But I just got to keep reminding myself, anytime you go in the woods, you are always being watched. Everything from birds to squirrels to everything bigger.
Sure.
Anytime you walk in the woods, there's at least a dozen set of eyes on you at any one given
Look,
time.
I don't care how long. I don't care how long you've been going in the woods. You can creep yourself out in the woods. You can.
Oh, absolutely.
You can. You can scare yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this creature, it's elusive by nature, and it doesn't seem to be too territorial, or I feel we know more about them by now. They probably yield the ground to the first intruder.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Stay away. Just stay away. Is what seems obvious to me. They just stay away from you.
Yeah, absolutely. And they want nothing to do with it. Sometimes they're a little curious. That gets them in trouble. So many more accounts I've looked into, seems to be a case where they came near people rather than the other way around. Yeah.
Well, look, I had them around me for 7 years, and I know they were around me because I was interacting with them. I didn't know I was interacting with, but when I pissed them off, that's when I saw it. And it was a whole ordeal. And I never went back in the woods again, not to hunt or anything like that. I've only ever gone back to film with other people, and I still don't like going. But real quick, tracks. Found any of those?
Oh, yes. Best set of footprints for 1986 along Ballbeard Creek, which flows into the Chilliwack area. I found 112 of them. And that was after a sighting with an American couple who were visiting and on a fishing trip. They came up and they spent a week in Vancouver because Expo was going on at the time. And then they were here for a couple of days. They were fishing. All he remembers is looking back at his wife. She's pointing, and he said there was this large gorilla thing sniffing a fish stringer that they had about 4 or 5 trout on. And it grabbed the stringer, took off, went across the main road, and disappeared along the banks of Ballbeard Creek. If I had been 15 seconds later, I would have missed these people, but I caught them because I drove into the exit rather than the entrance. And I ran into a red pickup truck with a camper on with Utah license plates. And I asked him, do you hear anything about something strange being seen? And she said, oh, you mean the Bigfoot? And he just looked at her as if to say, shut up. But I managed to calm him down, and they agreed to put off their leaving for a few minutes while they told me the whole story. 2 other guys who were down. Now, this is where I never discount possibility of a hoax. Were kind of snickering about the whole thing down front. They hadn't seen anything and they didn't believe in it. Maybe that's why they were snickering. Who knows? And I went across and searched along the banks of Ballbeard Creek, and I found the tracks. The witnesses never saw them. And I cast 2 of them, and it was that incident that convinced me. And because my ex-wife at the time was putting on a lot of pressure on me to, just put this Sasquatch thing to the back burner in your own time and concentrate on more important things. But no, that was it. And I cast 2 of the prints, and I've never forgotten it. It's known in the Sasquatch field as the Chilliwack River Find. August of 1986. Best set of prints I ever saw. Wasn't the first set of prints I ever saw, but it was the best set of prints I ever saw, and the first time I ever tried to cast any. By the way, when you cast a print for the first time, for God's sakes, give the plaster at least an hour to dry. It says on the box 15 minutes. No, give it an hour. Or you're going to have a mess on your hands. And after that, there was the tracks at Ruby Creek. It was just in 2008. Cast one of those up around Merritt. Saw a good set of prints up there. Cast one of those. And yeah, I've seen footprints on at least eight occasions. But British Columbia is not that great for tracks, because it's West Coast rainforest and everything is spongy. So unless something steps in a soft spot or something, it's usually not going to leave footprints behind. They used to say in the old days, if you want to see a Sasquatch, go to British Columbia. If you want to see his footprints, go to Northern California. Because in the old days, they didn't harden their Forest Service road. And you always had that 3 inches of dust on the roads. And even a bird would leave a beautiful set of prints. Wreaked havoc with air engine intakes, but it was great for tracks. It's not that way anymore. They do harden the roads in Northern California, but back in the old days, the 60s and 70s, it was great for finding tracks down there. Yeah.
Mississippi's the same way. Go ahead.
Sorry, Bill. Just going back to what you were saying before about, believing, just some of the things that have been said in the chat. I've never seen a Bigfoot, and I believe Kerry 100%, but I've never seen one. And it's different for someone who's seen one. And just imagine me, especially in England, going around to a friend of mine's talking about Bigfoot and going, yeah, they exist because Kerry saw one. It doesn't, you know, they don't know Kerry. And so I'm with Thomas, and I know people are kind of like fighting it a little bit that he's not committing to saying they exist. He's not. He's pretty sure. I'm pretty sure he believes they exist, but I don't know. I've never seen one, and doesn't think he's seen. You know,
Yeah. Well, if you haven't seen one, you have to believe. You've got no choice.
Yeah.
You don't have a choice. You can't commit fully. You
Well,
can
it's
say
like,
you can all day long, but you just
well,
can't.
it's like you said. I'd stick to the fact I do. I'm only 90% convinced because I got to leave 10% off in case I'm wrong.
Sure. Because you haven't seen it. I get that.
Well, I might have seen it. It was just too far away to see any detail. I can't figure out what that thing could have been. It was the odds are much higher that it was not a man that I saw, but because I didn't get a close-up look at it, and I stick to the facts. I saw a figure, an upright walking jet black figure. And that's the only thing I could say about it because those are the facts. That's what I saw.
Now, those tracks had to have brought you a lot closer than you were.
Oh, damn right it did. It convinced me to ignore my ex-wife and say, I'm going to stick to this.
Now, I never saw a track, not one. And I was a hunter. I looked at the ground. I never saw one human-shaped footprint, big, small, nothing. And you had to think that makes perfect sense. You need to know if we believe this creature is predisposed to hiding and staying hid, they got to know they leave tracks, and they're going to not leave as many as possible, especially where they know there's someone else around. Okay, I'll stop.
No, I just hope I've kind of, chat was going a bit crazy about this. And I'm sure I don't need to defend Thomas. You know, he's.
Oh, I've been attacked by the best, my dear. Go ahead.
I know he's a tough guy, but it's just one of those. It's a bit like Leon, who thinks scientifically, and it seems to clash with people who've just seen one and that's it, and they know, and that's all right. But there's more to it, and it's not because.
Well, the people who have seen one, and I'm assuming that they do exist, the people who have seen one, they're one up on me. I would love to get a good look at one and confirm that I have not been wasting my time for the last 42 years and confirm that I'm right. I would just love it to happen close up once, and I keep trying, but so far it has not happened. But I am not giving up on it.
Come down to Florida with us in March. You have a really, really good chance down there.
Mm-hmm. You know Diane Stalking by any chance?
Doesn't sound familiar.
Diane Stalking Ness. She's in Oregon now, but she spent many years in Florida looking into the skunk ape reports.
This is a good point by Bill Reed. Hi, Bill. There is evidence of existence, but there is enough absence of hard evidence.
Right, and the hard evidence is exactly what I said. Science getting what science has already demanded. And when you ask them what it is, they say the same thing every time. We need a body or a piece of the body. Nothing else will do. That's the way it works. And no amount of politically correct wishful thinking will ever change it.
Well, see, when I see that, I think immediately about the nature of this creature. Mm-hmm. This is how good they are. Mm-hmm. This is just where my mind goes. They are so good at staying away from us, obviously. Mm-hmm. If they weren't, we would have a whole lot better evidence than we do. So that's where my head goes immediately, is this nature of this creature is to stay away, and they've got everything over us, especially in the woods, and they just stay away. And that's what I get about these videos you see where they've got somebody in a suit, they're walking through the woods and they're just walking, lumbering, they're got their head down, kicking around. That is just not the way these things behave for the most part. Now, someone might have seen one acting that way for whatever reason. I don't know. But when you see these videos, and you can tell it's obviously a guy in a suit doing this, and this is how they're acting. They're just walking and they're swinging their arms real big and, taking the big, long steps. It's just not how they act. If it was, we would have millions of images of Sasquatch like that.
Mm-hmm. And also, they're probably not, I would say, nearing extinction or anything like that, but they're not as common as other animals. My guess is there's one Sasquatch for every 100 bears in any given area. But that is complete hypothesis on my part. You got 100 black bears in a given area, you probably have one Sasquatch. Now, I have an hypothesis. Yeah, it may be. You never know. But I tend to think, and again, this is all hypothesis on my part, that they probably exist, and we've talked about this before, Dada, in family groups. One dominant male and a number of females and young, right? That male tolerates the daughters, but once the sons get to a certain age, he drives them off. And they go off and they start living a nomadic lifestyle, getting bigger, getting stronger, getting bigger, getting stronger. And maybe one day they'll come across a family group and challenge the dominant male and either kill him or drive him off. And maybe some of these older, rather sickly ones people reporting are former dominant and dethroned males or nomadic males that never found a family group, and they just live their whole lives that way. And if the dominant male is driven off by a young challenger and he's lucky enough not to get killed, he goes back to that nomadic lifestyle for the rest of his life. And that's what people are seeing most of the time, these nomadic males going about their business, getting bigger, getting stronger. Because we've got so many communities here in British Columbia, and I'm sure it's the same in Washington, Oregon, where for large periods of time go by without any reports at all. Then all of a sudden, for about a week, several people see something, and they stop almost as soon as they had started. And so one had come into the area, hung around for a while, and then moved on. And I've encountered that time and time again. But again, that's only hypothesis on my part and assuming that the Sasquatch does indeed exist.
Before we run out of time, let's talk about some of the encounters that you've looked into. One in particular, the is it the Crandall campground?
Oh, the Crandall campground incident. Yeah, May long weekend 1988. That's one of my favorites. Yeah, it was two couples were. I think it will be considered a Sasquatch classic someday. It's in Waterton Lakes National Park, which is in the extreme southwest corner of Alberta, bordering British Columbia and, of course, Montana to the south. Two couples were playing cards late one night. They were staying in Site C3, the Crandall Campground. The one couple, Susan Ray Adams and her husband, decided to go off to the public washroom facilities to brush their teeth before turning in. And they started walking down the trail. And the public washrooms only had one little porch light shining in the distance. Something was standing on the trail between them and the washroom, and they got close up to it that it let out a deep, throaty grunting noise at them. He described it, Scott Stone has described it as sort of like a grunt that you hear a bull make sometimes when it's letting out a lot of air, as if to say, hey, I'm here, don't come any closer. Well, Susan, being a real afraid type at night, she thought bear, and she pulled away from her husband yelling, it's a blank, blank, blank bear. If you've ever been to Waterton Lakes National Park, it is famous for its grizzly bear population, and they've got more black bears than grizzly bears. They're bears all the time. And she ran back to the camp, and the other couple heard her yell bear, and it was helter-skelter for the cars. They all ran into the cars. But Scott Stone asked, he kept his eye on it. He slowly backed away. And all he saw was a large shadowy figure from the washroom light behind it. So you can see the outline move off the trail to his left. And he came back in the car. And he tried to get into the car next to his wife, but she had locked the door and she wouldn't let him in. I guess somebody had to be sacrificed. So he ended up getting in the car with the other lady. They switched on the headlights of both cars, and this thing moved into the area illuminated by the lights, and they all watched it cross right to left, and it was heading off towards Blackstone Brook, and they're all amazed. And of course, Scott and Darren Gillis, who was the other guy, he knew exactly what they were looking at. He came out, that was a blankety blank 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 Sasquatch. And the two men, they wanted to climb into the car and drive around and try to see it again. Two women wanted nothing to do with that. Matter of fact, Susan wanted to pack up and head back to Calgary. She had enough camping. But they managed to calm her down. And they all ended up driving around, and they ran into a red pickup truck that was, they flashed their lights at it, and it turned out these three people had seen something, and they were driving around trying to see it again too. So this may be an incident with actually 7 witnesses rather than 4. But this is where our 4 main witnesses did the odd thing. They reported it. They went out of their way to go to the park warden's office, and in Canada, in national parks, are called wardens, not rangers. They left the report with Warden Alan Dibb, and Darren Gillis insisted on putting something in writing. they were perfectly willing just to hear the story and let it go at that. But no, he said, I want something in writing. As far as I know, that written report is still on file in the Wilderness Office in Waterton Lakes National Park. And he said, he told me, I interviewed him later, and he told me he did everything he could to convince these people, oh, you probably saw a bear. Bears sometimes stand up on their hind legs. We got bears all over the place around here, you know, and all that. And he said, no, he said, no matter how hard he tried, they would not be, you know, convinced otherwise. That what they saw was a Sasquatch. They said it was rather lean and taller than what the stills of the Patterson Gimlin film I showed them. But they said it was definitely a Sasquatch, and it walked off towards Blackstone Brook, and they never saw it again. And I over the year, I interviewed all 4 witnesses independently. And I interviewed Alan Deb, did an investigation. I visited the site I don't know how many times. And both women were school teachers. And I remember I used to get called in to talk about the Sasquatch and to school kids in the Calgary region. I went in there once, and there was Susan Ray Adams. They had asked her to come in, and I was sitting there watching her tell the same story she had told me 10 years before for all these kids, you know, and it was incredible. I've written about it quite extensively in the books. It's called the Crandall Campground Incident. It's one of my favorites. And I have no idea that someday, if the Sasquatch does indeed exist, this will probably be go down as one of the classic tales anyway. Yeah. The only drawback I have is who were the 3 people in the other truck, because I was never able to track them down. And it's possible that these 3 people that pulled something off or were just hanging around to see if their tactics were effective. That's a possibility. Can't ignore that. But yeah. I doubt it. Yeah, I doubt it. So you never know. You have to keep that in mind. But the Crandall Campground is one of the best ones I ever looked into. And it was very, very convincing. These witnesses were very, very convincing to talk to. Susan and Scott have since divorced and lived separate lives. The other couple have since married, and they have a platoon of kids. So, yeah.
So, say we found a body, what would you be doing? What's the protocol for you?
Probably moving to Okanagan Lake and start buying a boat. Start looking for Ogopogo. It's over. Once it's over, I'm done. Yeah, I'll just be happy to say, hey, I was right. And of course, the scientific community who said there was no such thing for all these decades would say, well, we kind of knew it was there all along. You know?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
What's the?
I just picture Rennie. I just picture Rennie up and down. Those lying.
Go on, Kerry.
No, it wasn't important. I think they're lying already. Sorry. That's how I feel.
Have we got any questions in the chat? I just need to go back up and have a look.
Yeah, we'll take. Is my internet going bad? Can you tell? Am I going in and out?
Don't seem to be, no.
Okay. It was just hard to. What would your protocol be, Thomas, if you actually say you found a body? What would you do?
First thing I'd do would be contact Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum. Dr. John Bindernagel used to be on top of that list, but he's passed on now. Probably Jeff Meldrum, because he's probably the only qualified scientist who would actually probably listen to me. If I found the body, like a full carcass of the Sasquatch, well, you probably can't remove it. I take the head and I take the hands. And as simple as that, because you probably can't carry out the whole thing, and you'd be very embarrassed if you didn't take anything. You went back there and it was gone, you know. So you'd have to take the head and the hands to bring it in. Protocol, well, the only protocol is tell the scientific community and let the slow chain of acceptance roll. Other scientists will want to look at it and they'll confirm it. And through time, some politician will go, well, I guess they're saying it's real. I guess we can't ignore it anymore. Gee, do they need protecting? Here comes a study to see if they do need protecting. And maybe 15 years after I found the hard physical remains, they will declare the Sasquatch a living, breathing species. It'll be, and it will no longer be in the realm of cryptozoology, but in the realm of everyday zoology. And they'll say, what was all the fuss about?
Oh well, for sure.
Yeah.
But I always said that if there was ever any grant money available to study them, they would be real tomorrow. Absolutely.
You got to remember, science is absolutely dedicated to its infallibility, right? They only look at things that are already established to find out more points about it. The days of guys going out on expeditions to make new discoveries and stuff like that, well, those are days of the past, and they weren't even that popular back then. It was always the layman who made the discovery, and it took weeks to get the scientific community interested enough to even look at it. You know?
Yeah, well, that's us. That's the researcher these days. The layman.
Yeah.
The problem is nobody really knows what they're doing.
Yeah, no scientist is going to do a Diane Fossey or Jane Goodall type study of the Sasquatch, and for good reason. Well, they know Diane Fossey and Jane Goodall weren't out to prove the existence of chimpanzees and gorillas. That was already established because someone went out and brought in a body.
Yeah,
they already knew they were there.
Right. Meldrum wouldn't risk his job and would turn it over. Jeff Meldrum has been on the show and said if enough evidence was presented to him, they would find the funding to test it to find out what it is. So,
what does he mean by turn it over?
Well, I don't know.
If you give Jeff Meldrum, again, he's not going to keep it in a freezer in his living room or in his kitchen. It's going to be in the university, and yes, other professors are going to look at it. Yeah, absolutely. So if you mean by turn it over, he gets the ball rolling for its acceptance, you're absolutely right.
Well, he's saying wouldn't risk his job and would turn it. I mean, I don't know what that means, but
yeah,
I don't know.
Name to it.
No, the rest of them would say, gee, Jeff, all those bad names we called you behind your back for the last 10 years, I guess you were wrong.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt. The late Grover Krantz went through the same thing. Yeah.
Well, we have the technology now. And we've got YouTube Live, and all you need is an internet connection, 1,000 subscribers. And if you go out there and you find a body, you just go live right then and show everybody live. I mean, unless YouTube just shuts you down, the government, if that's a real thing, they're going to come in.
The problem is with YouTube and the internet in general. The problem with YouTube and the internet in general is all the hoaxing. I've already seen videos on YouTube where people claim to have found bodies and things like that, and they're not on for very long.
Well, I mean, that would be the first step. That would be the first step for me. Then, obviously, you take the head in the hands, but you've got the video proof that everyone's already seen. That way, if something happens to the evidence, you at least got something.
Yeah, it's like the Georgia boys and their body in the freezer. Gosh, such a stir a few years ago. Come on, I recognize that right away. That was that very impressive, or Bigfoot costume is American, from that company in California. They make all kinds of high-tech Halloween costumes, and Bigfoot is one of them, and that's what they had. They had it stuffed with big guts in the freezer.
Well, this is absolutely.
But as soon as I heard a guy named Biscardi was involved, I wrote the whole thing off. So,
old Tom. Well, to me, it's absolute proof that people are so want to believe in this creature because he pulled the wool over people's eyes twice.
Absolutely.
He did it twice, and people believed him both times. And I was all in the first time when I saw it. It was just a year after I had just seen one. I was like, man, this guy's got one. He's calling this press conference and then gets up the podium and says, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Human nature is human nature. I could start a religion tomorrow for the worship of bowling balls. I bet you I have 60 people signed up in the first month. There are people there who want to believe anything.
Not disparaging bowlers.
Yeah.
By the way, or researchers. I say no one knows what they're doing. There's guys out there that know what they're doing in the woods, but when it comes to getting evidence of this creature, it's just so hard to do. That's
well, absolutely, because you're looking for something that's like a needle in a haystack, and the needle is basically the hide and seek champion in North America. So, good luck. Keep trying. It's got to happen eventually, but
we're gonna give it a shot. I'm going to give it one shot I'm going to be able to say I gave it my efforts. It's going to be a week long, and we're going to film every single second of it.
Down in Florida?
Down in Florida. 9 of us. We're going to
Now, keep in mind, there's an area in the Everglades that's known for a chimpanzee population that has been thriving there for some time. No. Keep that in mind. And there's
Now,
also another
now-
area where they believe a couple of escaped orangutans are wandering around. And keep an eye out for the damn pythons, for God's sakes. There are more of them now than there is in Burma.
No, we've got solid evidence. Some of the best evidence I've ever seen
Mm-hmm.
just came out of there. And I've been down there. I've been around them. It's a very uncomfortable place. You can hear them. You can smell them. They're there.
Well,
They're
but
there.
let me remind you, when it comes to photographic evidence, it's got to be Patterson film quality or better, and even that won't prove it.
Well, I think to me, it's going to have to go further than that. You're not going to be able to do it with an image. What you're going to have to do is present the narrative, the story of the way things went and who these people are. The light has to be shined on the people doing it as much as the creature itself, because that's where the credibility is going to come from. Then you're going to have to take all your metadata and attach it to it so people can look and make sure you're not throwing CGI in there or anything like that. So there's going to be a lot to it. Not going to prove anything. There's no way we're going to prove it, but all we want to do is get something a little bit more convincing.
You can if you come across something like this.
Yeah, is that the Gigantopithecus?
Absolutely, yeah.
What
If
they
you come
believe
across
it looks
something-
like?
If you come across something like that, don't leave it there. Bring it in.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. I'm going to leave some of my own evidence there, probably. That's if I run into that. Did you have anything else, Danielle?
Leon's wishing you a Merry Christmas, Thomas.
Merry Christmas, Leon. And hopefully 2021 will be a lot better than 2020, because 2020 sucked, to be honest with you. Yeah, I'd like to just mention the recent passing of Dr. Brian Sykes. We lost a good one there.
Wow. Did not know that.
Yeah. He just passed away a few days ago. Good friend and colleague of mine, Bill Miller, passed away October 1st. And of course, this COVID crap keeps going on. I won't be sorry to see 2020 go. That's for sure.
Well, the vaccine's here, so hopefully that'll curb this nightmare we're in some.
Yeah.
But hey, it's been a great show, Thomas. Thank you so much for coming on. Please come back, because I'm sure we could go on and on and on for about so many other things. We didn't get into a lot of the I wanted to hear some of the encounters that you thought were credible, but let's save that. Let's save that for the next show, because we're out of time on this one. Danielle's probably about to go to bed, I'm sure. I think it's 2 a.m. there, or 3.
2 a.m.
I'd like to hear about yours too, sir. I want to hear the details of your sighting.
Okay. Well, hey, I made a complete film about it. Went to the place, and I'll send you. I'll get Danielle to send you that link, or I'll send it to you, and you can watch it.
It's on YouTube.
It is. It's on this channel right
Excellent.
here.
Please, yeah, send me the link. I'll have a look at her.
Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna hit you up on Facebook and send you some pictures of some stuff we got down there too. So just get your take on them. But thanks everybody for joining us here tomorrow night. Danielle, who we got?
We've got Leon Thompson.
Leon Thompson.
He's recovering.
He's the head of Okanagan Bigfoot, and he keep telling him he's got to change that to Okanagan Sasquatch. Use the Canadian term, Leon.
I know he heard that. Make sure you wear that. Make sure you wear that elf costume too. I'm so anxious to see that. But we'll see you guys here tomorrow night, 7:00 p.m. Central. Thank you, Daniela. You did such a fantastic job, and thank you, Thomas Steenburg. Good to have you here, sir.
Thank you, gang. Enjoyed it.